we are now less than 2 weeks away from the Flood's return. I gotta say, my hype levels for Awakening the Nightmare are through the fucking roof. However, their return does have some people confused, because they think that they completely destroyed the Flood at the end of Halo 3, and that Halo 3 was the be-all, end-all for them, and bringing them back on the Ark specifically invalidates that ending. Now, I'm not going to argue that it was the absolute best way to bring them back. I could definitely think of a few ways that I would have preferred, but by no means does the Flood's return in Halo Wars 2 invalidate anything from Halo 3, and this video is going to demonstrate that, along with some other things too. So first off, let me show you a quote spoken by the Gravemind from Halo 3 itself that completely disproves this idea. So what the Gravemind is saying here is that basically the Flood, ironically, is like the tide. It ebbs and it flows. It spreads the infection and grows, and then it recedes, like a constant cycle. The bottom line is that the Gravemind literally says right here at the end of Halo 3 that firing the unstable ring is not the end of the Flood, and that they will return in the future. It's right there in the game. And that leads us to our next point. I've seen people confused that of all places for the Flood to return, they return on the Ark, which was supposedly sterilized by Installation 08, which is now the formal name for Installation 04C. Now, I've said this quite a few times in videos before, but I'm going to say it again today. There is no way on Earth that you can expect a ring, which is half built and not complete, to fire successfully and carry out its purpose 100% effectively.
Yeah.
It's like expecting a gun with only half a barrel to fire around straight. It's just not gonna happen. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
As much as you can argue the Flood returning on the Ark after Halo 3's ending does partially invalidate it, common sense dictates that the ring, which literally shook itself to pieces and exploded while firing, was never going to wipe out every single Flood form within its radius. That's why the Flood, returning from the bowels of High Charity's remains on the Ark, makes perfect sense. And that's just one of the ways the Flood continue to exist post-Halo 3. Another way the Flood continue to exist after Halo 3 is tied to Flood containment facilities. Now, these facilities were built by the Foreigners within Halo Rings, Shield Worlds, and other installations where the Flood was stored to be studied. Flood specimens were stored here during the Foreigner-Flood War, when the Flood was at its strongest, so the Foreigners could at least attempt to dissect and investigate their DNA and genetic makeup in hopes of finding an effective countermeasure that didn't require wiping the entire galaxy, or maybe, if they struck it lucky, a cure. After the conclusion of the war and the firing of the Halo array, the specimens within the facilities weren't destroyed, but instead were put into stasis in hopes that when the galaxy was reseeded and civilizations grew again, there'd at least be some way to prepare for the Flood's return. These civilizations would be able to maybe find the facilities and study the Flood again, and hell, you never know, maybe even find a cure. Flood research facilities also serve the same purpose, and they both tend to be located in extreme or harsh environments. So if there's a Flood outbreak, it's a lot harder for them to spread across the installation, but that's something that I'm going to cover in quite a bit more detail in a video that I have planned for the next few weeks. Anyways, back to the point. Even after Halo 3, there are still Flood specimens stored for research on Foreigner installations, and of course that creates the possibility of a containment breach, and then a subsequent outbreak that could grow to be a pretty sizable force, which is exactly what happened on Installation 05 and formed the Gravemind. That is precisely how that Gravemind was formed. Anyways, moving over to something far more grandiose. It's actually possible that other galaxies that we've never even heard anything from have been infected by the Flood. Now, this could be due to some Flood maybe escaping the Milky Way galaxy during the Foreigner-Flood War, somehow managing to acquire technology capable of allowing them to enter slipspace travel to another galaxy and then infecting it. However, there's a much more likely reason for this, and that is due to the precursors. Now, it could be that precursors in other galaxies did what those in the Milky Way and Path Chthona did at the end of the Foreigner Precursor War. turn themselves into a dust, which is supposed to preserve them, and then allow them to reform into their former selves at a later date. But as we know, this dust ended up corrupting over time, and therefore created the Flood. Now, it's always possible that this exact same thing happened in other galaxies too. Precursors in other galaxies went into stasis and ground themselves down, and then over time, they didn't know that it was going to happen, but over time, it corrupted, and it created the Flood.
Yeah?
So, that's 3 other ways the Flood continued to exist in different states and forms following Halo 3. The most important thing that everybody needs to take away from this video and know before Awakening the Nightmare comes out is that Installation 08 was not stable at the end of Halo 3, and that's why there's Flood still hidden away on the Ark. The ring was faulty and not complete. Maybe it invalidates Halo 3's ending, but at least to me, it makes absolute 100% sense that there would still be Flood alive.
So I would absolutely love it if they brought back the Flood. I know I've said that a ton of times, but like, and he just proved it that there is that there are like ways for the Flood to still be alive even in this point in time. So I would absolutely love it if the Flood were somehow brought back in games, not just in like, you know, shows, movies, books, whatever, comic books. I don't care. I would love it if it were actually in a game. Even though I hated dealing with them, they were like a huge pain in the butt, they were still an interesting enemy to have to fight, because in all 3 of those Halo games, it was so cool to have to fight, to think, okay, I have to fight the Covenant and also the Flood, you know? Well, not in Halo 3. Halo 3, we had the Covenant as buddies, but then we also kind of didn't. We had some of the brutes, this, and, you know, you guys get it. But I would absolutely love it to fight Flood again. You know, in the most recent Halo game, I loved having to fight brutes again. We haven't had to fight brutes since Halo 3, and it was really fun to have to deal with brutes. And I really love how 343 brought back the whole like Berserker brute from like Halo 2 and Halo 3. That was really fun, and I would love it if they brought back that same nostalgia and brought back the Flood. You know, that would be so fun to do in a game. I would absolutely love it. I want it so bad.